woman was thrown out of $1 million wedding for wearing a simple dress. Yet no one knew she was the bride. When her husband, a reclusive billionaire, appeared and said, "Take your hands off my wife," the world froze. And that was only the beginning. One June afternoon, sunlight glided softly over Lake Como's surface as if whispering a secret. Sloane Mercer stepped out of an old Fiat, her cream linen dress swaying gently in the breeze, a quiet greeting to this ancient land. No makeup, no designer labels, no diamond tiara atop her head, just an invitation, thick paper with faded black ink, her name in calligraphy, Sloane Mercer. She held it like a piece of her identity, not to prove anything, but to remind herself she was still walking into a place where she supposedly belonged. Via Vieste glowed like a palace, its ancient tiles bathed in sunset. Yet it was there she was about to be rejected, at the main gate, where black iron gates with intricate patterns opened like a ritual of the elite. Chad Lawson, a burly man with an earpiece tucked into his collar, stopped her. His eyes flicked over her simple dress, worn flats, and lingered where no jewels adorned her ears, neck, or bag. "Staff use the back entrance," he said, avoiding her gaze. Sloane Mercer smiled faintly, neither angry nor flustered. She handed him the invitation. "I'm a guest," her voice cool as a breeze cutting through the stifling afternoon. Chad Lawson took it, frowning. "Wait here," he muttered, turning away, leaving her under the arch of white roses cascading from the gate. Footsteps echoed from the stone courtyard. 3 women emerged into the sunlight like figures from a lavish film. Brielle Stanton in a shimmering gold dress, Aubrey Sinclair draped in sapphire silk, and Lena Monroe with sun-kissed skin like an ad for an exorbitant summer. Their eyes scanned Sloane, their mouths unguarded. "The bride's old maid," Brielle Stanton smirked. "Here to beg for tips." Aubrey Sinclair raised her phone. "This'll be tonight's opening shot." A click. Lena Monroe slid her sunglasses halfway down her nose, her gaze raking Sloane from head to toe, pricing a clearance item. Bold to wear, thrift shop chic here, or desperate. Sloane didn't bow her head. She met Brielle Stanton's eyes, her look not sharp but serene, unnervingly so. "You can ask me directly if you're curious." Her voice was light as early summer rain, yet it slowed the air by half a beat. Brielle Stanton blinked, then sneered, "Ordlawling. I don't chat with the help." Laughter echoed from the terrace where guests were gathering. Vivian Hale shook her head, wine sloshing in her glass. "I bet she's the cake lady, lost her way." Grant Hale guffawed. "Or someone faked an invite to snag a tycoon?" The air grew thick. Laughter mingled with the sound of phones recording. The lake's breeze blew, but it couldn't dispel the simmering humiliation. Sloane Mercer stood still, shoulders straight, eyes unblinking. She said nothing, for if a single look could convey resolve, hers had just spoken 1,000 wordless words. The stone terrace of Villa Vieste grew crowded. Guests stepped from Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and Maybachs in a glittering parade. Ball gowns brushed against each other, perfumes mingling in the breeze to form a stifling scent, like a mask hiding something raw and aching. Amid this orchestrated display of grandeur, Sloane Mercer stood still. Her hand clutched the crumpled invitation, her gaze steady, but the breeze had lost its coolness. It now carried the metallic tang of foreboding. A group gathered near the rose arch, their curious stares like children spotting blood on a wedding dress. "She hasn't been kicked out yet," Vivian Hale whispered, loud enough to lack discretion. "Maybe she's the tea server, angling for a starring role?" "No, that face looks familiar," Grant Hale said, adjusting his bow tie. "Could be a live stream stunt. These types are full of tricks." He glanced at his phone, snapped a photo, and tagged it. "Who is she?" Behind them, another pair puffed on cigars. Sterling Whitmore, silver hair and a jaw sharp as a razor, snorted. "Someone should tell her wearing flea market rags to Atlas Westbrook's wedding is an insult, not just an insult, Tatiana Frost cut in, her sapphire necklace glinting like a light trap. It's foolish and embarrassing. Sloane Mercer remained motionless, but in her ears each word fell like pebbles into a seemingly calm lake. Every glance that slid over her was an invisible blade, bare and unapologetic. Suddenly, a phone screen flared. Aubrey Sinclair was live streaming. To the 200,000 watching, any guesses on our plain Jane's role here? Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes were ice. I'll call her the mysterious maid. Told you, Brielle Stanton chimed in, her champagne flute trembling, not from emotion but excitement. She's definitely hunting for an heir. Lena Monroe yawned, turning to the camera. Can someone call security? This is a Westbrook wedding, not a charity show. Laughter erupted, crashing like waves against a cliff. She was called a beggar, a predator, a disgrace in this perfect wedding. Each remark was no longer a jab, but a collective verdict from a crowd that didn't need truth, just a target to stone, someone to make them feel higher together. To the linen girl, a man's voice, Zane Prescott, a notorious tech bro, boomed, "The kitchen's that way." An olive flew from somewhere, striking Sloane's cheek, leaving a greasy smear. But she didn't flinch, didn't bow her head, didn't wipe it away. She let it stay, a perverse declaration that she knew exactly what was happening to her, and still chose to stand in the fire. No one asked why she didn't fight back. They didn't need the truth, they just needed their game, and they played it well. The clamor shattered like a curtain torn apart. Urgent footsteps swept across the stone, then a voice rang out, not loud, not sharp, but striking every heartbeat like a bronze bell in silence. Take your hands off my wife. The world stopped. From the steps leading to the terrace, Atlas Westbrook descended. His black tuxedo fit perfectly, his hair slightly tousled, as if he'd just walked away from an inner storm to be here. The sunset draped across his shoulders like a mantle of authority that needed no tailoring. His eyes, sharp as a blade, steady as mountain stone, locked onto the hands of Chad Lawson and Reese Maddox gripping Sloane Mercer. Chad stammered, releasing her instantly while Reese stepped back, his face ashen. Sloane Mercer said nothing. She only turned toward the man who'd shattered the nightmare. In her eyes, the stillness cracked. Atlas strode to her, taking her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, so softly only she could hear. She nodded. "Always, Beck." He faced the crowd, those frozen in shock, the live stream now silent, everything they thought they knew proven wrong. He took a breath and said, "This is Sloane Mercer, my wife." Murmurs erupted. A champagne flute crashed onto the stone floor. Brielle Stanton stood petrified, hands trembling. Aubrey Sinclair fumbled to end her live stream 2 seconds too late. Too late, it had already spread. "We married 6 months ago in a small courthouse. No cameras, no headlines, no diamonds. Because we didn't need them. We needed each other." He paused, his gaze sweeping over every face, every person who'd laughed, filmed, pointed. "And today we're holding a public ceremony, not to flaunt, but to see. Who can see what's truly worth seeing?" Vivian Hale bowed her head. Zane Prescott stepped back. Sterling Whitmore's cane no longer tapped the stone. "You saw a simple dress and judged. You saw a woman without anything sparkling on her and called her a predator." His voice dropped, like a stone into water. "But she's the one who turned down a teaching position at Yale to support me when I was just a guy with an old laptop and an idea no one believed in. She believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself." No one spoke. Even the breeze seemed to still. Sloane Mercer squeezed his hand lightly. Not a word from her, but her presence, hair disheveled, dress smudged, eyes never yielding, was a declaration louder than any speech. "Don't call her a climber," Atlas concluded. "Because if anyone here is clinging to something that doesn't belong to them, it's you. Clinging to an empty shell called status." Silence. Then someone unknown clapped. Once, Twice. Then, like a swelling wave, other claps followed, scattered, reluctant, but real. Amid it, Sloane Mercer stood. Not taller, not grander, just herself. And for the first time that day, she wasn't alone. "Maya Quinn," Atlas Westbrook's voice rang out, low and resolute, like a gavel striking in a courtroom. "Pull the guest list. Cross-section it with the footage. I want to know who took part in humiliating my wife." No shouting, no reckless anger, just a deadly silence threading through every heartbeat. Maya Quinn, in a perfectly tailored navy suit, said nothing. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and tapped her tablet. Beneath her fingers, data came alive. Names, faces, positions, recorded voices, expressions, all pieced together like a tech-fueled game of judgment. A security guard approached Brielle Stanton, lightly touching her shoulder. "Ma'am, please come with me." The polite words carried the weight of a verdict. "What?" Brielle blurted, still clutching her wine glass, her other hand gripping her clutch as if holding on to a slipping identity. "You've got the wrong person." "No mistake, ma'am. The live stream footage, your statements, your hostile demeanor, all recorded." Brielle Stanton was escorted through the iron gates, where roses shed petals in the breeze. Her heels caught on a stone edge, stumbling, then tearing. A small slip, a faint "oh" from the crowd, a fall, not physical, but a collapse of prestige before the lenses. When she looked up, cameras were waiting. Next was Aubrey Sinclair. Another guard stepped forward. "Your phone will be held to secure evidence." She lifted her chin, defiant as ever, but this time there was no stage for her performance. She walked away, each step heavy, her face no longer a mask of cool authority, just empty. Lena Monroe backed away, trying to melt into the crowd, but it was too late. "You were recorded calling Sloane Mercer a gold digger and inciting her removal from the event." Maya Quinn's declaration cut like ice. No further judgment needed. The three women, once the center of attention, were now pushed to the margins. No one laughing along, no one echoing their taunts. In that silence, the cruelest realization hit. Being ejected from a party wasn't the worst punishment. It was society twisting their necks and turning its back, all on camera. Vivian Hale bowed her head. Grant Hale stopped commenting. Zane Prescott tried a quip. "Guess I won't be signing that neural core deal." No one laughed. Sterling Whitmore spoke up. "I'm a titled man." Atlas stared at him for a long moment, which is exactly why you should know shame. When Maya Quinn announced publicly, "The following individuals have been removed from the guest list: Brielle Stanton, Aubrey Sinclair, Lena Monroe, Zane Prescott, Sterling Whitmore." The crowd stayed silent. No protests. No defenses. Each person breathed softly, as if fearing their name might be next. And Sloane Mercer. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She stood there like a marker dividing the false from the true. No need to move to prove anything. She was the reason truth reclaimed its seat, at the heart of the celebration. As the sunset spilled over the mountains encircling Lake Como, the grand gates of Villa Vieste opened once more. No more jeers, no more live streams tracking every step, only the soft strains of a string ensemble, a quiet apology to the woman they had once rejected. And then Sloane Mercer appeared. Gone was the linen dress stained with oil, the worn flats. She now wore an ivory silk wedding gown, clinging to her graceful form as if woven from the evening light itself. Hand-stitched pearls shimmered with each breath. Her hair fell loose, unadorned save for a diamond star-shaped hairpin, a small gift from Atlas Westbrook from the days when they had nothing but dreams. No one laughed, no one whispered. The gazes now held no scrutiny, only silence. Her presence needed no introduction. Sloane Mercer didn't enter as someone accepted. She returned as someone who no longer needed permission. Atlas Westbrook waited at the altar, between rows of white silk-draped chairs, beneath an arch of climbing roses and summer peonies. He said nothing when he saw her, only extended his hand, palm open, as he had from the very first day. She placed her hand in his. Father Raymond Beck, the silver-hailed officiant, his white robe rippling in the breeze, smiled gently. He needed no lengthy words, no talk of forgiveness or the power of love. It had all been proven by Sloane's silence, Atlas's voice, and the eyes of the crowd seated behind. Marriage, he said, is not built on display, but on trust. Today we are here, not to begin something, but to affirm what has long existed. Sloane Mercer looked into Atlas Westbrook's eyes as he spoke his vows. No flourish, no rhetoric, just, I will be your home, even if the world turns its back, even if darkness blocks the way. She answered, her voice warm as early winter's breath. I will be the last light left, when all else has fallen away. No one dared clap immediately. No one broke that moment. It was a sacredness needing no incense. A moment when a woman once dragged from the ceremony was now led back, not to flaunt victory, but to find her place. A young server girl brought a bouquet. She handed it to Sloane, looking up as if she'd learned something profound in a single day. Sloane bowed her head in thanks, her eyes softly smiling, a smile not for anyone else, but for herself. When they turned to face the crowd that had silently witnessed her humiliation, the applause began, scattered, then swelling, then resounding like a belated wave of respect. But Sloane Mercer didn't need it. She didn't step onto a pedestal of glory. She didn't raise a banner of triumph. She only held the hand of the man she chose and walked with him toward the sunset, where the light came not from the sky, but from her. Less than 2 hours after the ceremony, from Manhattan penthouses to Beverly Hills makeup studios, from Dubai finance circles to small soul cafes, the name Sloane Mercer swept across media like an unforecast storm. She is the bride, gold digger or goddess. Brielle Stanton canceled the chaotic hashtags rocketed to global trending lists. A clip of Atlas Westbrook taking his wife's hand, declaring, "This is Sloane Mercer. My wife was sliced, remixed, scored with music, slowed to cinematic effect. Some made memes, some crafted short animations, some laughed, but most were struck silent." An anonymous account compiled every derogatory word hurled at Sloane in the 2 hours before the wedding. The video, titled "When Humanity Fails and One Woman Stands Firm," hit 10 million views in 12 hours. While social media erupted over a bride without diamonds stepping to the altar, Atlas Westbrook graced the cover of The Atlantic. The headline was simple: "Compassion is the greatest asset." In the interview, he didn't mention the scandal, didn't take swipes. He only recounted the moment Sloane Mercer left a Yale teaching position to join him in a cramped garage, when neurocore was just aimless code. "She chose me when I had nothing to choose," he said. "Today, I chose to make that public so the world might learn to look at itself." Not everyone learned. Brielle Stanton held a press conference apology. In a meticulously creased white blouse, flanked by a lawyer too tepid to salvage her image. The media didn't buy it. Brands pulled out. Her investment fund lost 70% of its value overnight. Aubrey Sinclair lost her live stream deal with a diamond brand. Her apology video was chopped into parodies by netizens. Lena Monroe locked her accounts, resurfacing with a post, "I learned fame doesn't save you from unkindness." While they scrambled for damage control, clawing at apologies, one person remained utterly silent. Sloane Mercer. She gave no interviews, skipped talk shows, posted no thank yous. She only wrote a handwritten letter to an independent journal, not Vogue, not Forbes, but a small publication focused on contemporary ethics. In it she wrote, "I didn't come to be pitied. I don't need anyone to place a crown on my head after they tried to crush it. I just want to live truthfully, and if that makes me a problem for society, then perhaps it's society that needs healing." The letter spread like a manifesto. People printed it on coffee mugs, t-shirts, posters in women-led startup offices. But Sloane Mercer didn't do it to become an icon. She was simply moving forward as always, on a path the world once tried to rip from beneath her feet, a path no one had the right to take. As the final applause of the ceremony faded and social media still swirled around the name Sloane Mercer, she chose the opposite, returning to the old house in suburban Palo Alto. The first workspace of Atlas Westbrook, where she once crouched among tangled network cables, eating cold sandwiches to tweak his code. The kitchen still held the scent of sleepless nights, wood, burnt coffee, and unformed faith. Sloane Mercer touched the wall where she'd scrawled in marker, "You got this, I believe in us." The words had faded, but she didn't erase them. The past, painful or beautiful, was part of why she stood tall today. And then the past knocked. A bouquet of white orchids arrived from Vivian Hale. Inside a handwritten note, "I forgot how to seek kindness because I'm so used to pretend. Thank you for reminding me that strength doesn't need a glamorous dress." Grant Hale sent an email. No signature, no excuses, just 3 lines. "I'm sorry, I was wrong, and I hope my daughter grows up different from me." Even Chad Lawson, who'd blocked her at the gate, came to see her. He stood at the door, hatless, hands clenched. "I messed up because I was taught wrong, but that day you made me realize I'm not the man I wanted to be." Reese Maddox, the woman who'd torn her invitation, sent a package, footage, a report, a handwritten apology, and a final line. "You don't know who I was before I learned to doubt every kind thing. Thank you for standing still." Sloane Mercer read it all, didn't reply immediately. She stepped into the backyard, where wild daisies grew among the grass. She wasn't angry, but forgiveness was more complex than handwritten apologies. That evening, Atlas Westbrook walked in, finding her on an old wicker chair, holding an unopened envelope. "Will you answer them?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Not all of them." "Because you're not ready?" She smiled, her eyes neither angry nor cold, just still as a lake. "Because not everyone is sincere, and forgiveness isn't about letting them back, it's about moving forward without needing them." He sat beside her. "You make me feel small." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I just stood still. The world ran around me." They sat there until the dew fell, saying nothing more. Some chapters close not with an exclamation point, but with a pause. Over 30 invitations from major brands flooded Sloane Mercer's hands within a week. Chanel wanted her as the face of their new campaign. Dior offered to sponsor a global style journey, and a renowned shoe brand even proposed remaking her worn flats, a limited edition dubbed the Unbent Heel. A fashion magazine sent a handwritten letter. "We were wrong not to put you on the cover before. This time we're ready to make it right." Sloane read them all in her usual quiet. No anger, no laughter, just sitting in her small study, its window facing an old maple tree, the breeze swaying like a heartbeat after a fever. What they didn't grasp was that she'd never needed their spotlight, nor did she need praise as a way to cleanse their past cruelty. One autumn morning, Sloane Mercer launched the Inner Value Project, a non-profit to support women humiliated or judged for their appearance, background, or silence. Its first office opened in the same neighborhood where she'd once taught part-time, beside an old bookstore and a cafe untouched by chain logos. No grand opening, no banners, just a photo in the main room of her in the oil-stained linen dress captioned simply, "The woman in this picture didn't need to change to be worthy, she was enough." The Inner Value Project rejected funding from brands that had once mocked her. She declined every ambassador offer. When asked why, Sloane said in a rare interview, "Because no one should become an icon from the pain others forced them to endure." And because of that, she became one. Within 2 months, over 100 women across the U.S. shared their stories with the organization. From a single mother called inferior at her in-law's wedding, to a barista secretly filmed for wearing a floral dress, to an interview. A veteran Guardian journalist wrote, "The irony is, because she didn't try to represent anyone, people saw themselves in her." When Sloane Mercer was invited to speak at a UN conference on gender equality, her speech lasted under 3 minutes. No charts, no grandiose words. She said only, "There's a silence that's scorned, the silence of those who don't repay evil with evil, but that same silence forces the world to stop and think. I'm not here to say I'm right. I'm here to remind us that kindness should never be underestimated." She stepped off the podium, shaking no hands, raising no fist in triumph. But the entire room stood, because Sloane Mercer didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. She only needed to stand fast, and the world knew to bow. Fame doesn't crash loudly, it falls quietly, piece by piece, like glass breaking on a thick carpet, unnoticed until you step on it and feel the sting. Brielle Stanton lost contracts with 3 major corporations in 2 weeks. A leaked Zoom meeting with shareholders where she screamed, "I'm the victim," became the corporate drama queen meme flooding social media. Her profiles went private but too late. A boycott Brielle campaign swept investment forums, triggering a mass withdrawal of capital from her fund. Aubrey Sinclair, who once live-streamed her mocking smile at Sloane Mercer, couldn't go live without clown emojis flooding the comments. A fashion brand that sponsored her issued a statement, "We do not endorse behavior that belittles others in any form." In a brief Instagram video, Aubrey said, "I've learned silence is golden." Top comment, "Too late to learn." Lena Monroe, whose venomous quip once electrified the banquet hall, vanished for a time. A month later, she resurfaced on her podcast, speaking of her healing journey after being wounded by the mob. Her voice was still smooth, her makeup flawless, but her audience no longer trusted her. Sponsors pulled out. Her videos stopped trending. One commenter wrote, "Sometimes the truth isn't what you say, it's what no one wants to hear anymore." At a mid-tier Santa Monica restaurant, Vivian Hale sat alone with an untouched glass of wine. Once the most sought-after woman in female investment circles, she refused to sign a public apology, calling it pointless. The industry's unspoken network turned away. No one betrayed her, they just stopped inviting her to the table. Simple, silent. Grant Hale quit social media. Friends said he started spending more time with his young daughter. No further statements. Perhaps he understood some mistakes aren't fixed with words, but by living without repeating them. Sterling Whitmore, who'd boldly mocked Sloane Mercer's flats, was ousted from the board of an education charity. An old video resurfaced, showing him laughing about firing an employee for dressing like she was going to a picnic. The aristocratic mask fell, revealing a face no one wanted as a role model. In the dim hues of this portrait of former titans, a harsh truth emerged. No one pushed them out of the game. They stepped off themselves. When the light shifts, the shadows must find somewhere to hide. In a cultural commentary outlet, a journalist wrote, "The world doesn't hate them, it simply no longer needs them to fuel its contempt." In another corner of the city, someone hung that quote above their desk, a reminder that fame can't save character, and sometimes the victor doesn't need to climb a golden podium. They just need to avoid falling with those who once loudly scorned them. One early winter morning, under a clear sky with gentle sunlight like a forgiving kiss, Sloane Mercer and Atlas Westbrook stood before a small wooden cabin deep in Nevada's pine forest, a place they'd once dreamed of retiring to when things settled down. They arrived sooner than planned, not to escape, but to live, truly live, without needing to prove anything to the world beyond. No reporters, no lavish wedding, just Father Raymond Beck, a bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked themselves, and 2 silver-plated rings crafted by a small artisanal workshop. No audience, but the forest birds sang, and golden sunlight danced on the shoulders of Sloane Mercer's woolen wedding dress. No silk gown this time. Just a simple long dress, her hand woven into his as if they were ordinary people loving ordinarily after an extraordinary journey. Atlas Westbrook spoke his vows in a low, steady voice, not for resonance, but to ensure she heard every word. I can't promise to shield you from all pain, but I'll be the place you can always return to. No need to be strong." She smiled, took his hand, and placed it gently over her heart. "And I promise, I won't let the world make us forget each other." No one clapped. No one needed to. They returned to the warm kitchen, where an apple pie baked in the oven and a charcoal sketch she'd drawn in their first year of love still hung on the wall. Sloane poured 2 cups of tea, one hand still gloved against the chill. Atlas turned on the radio. An old symphony played softly, like the score for an ending that needed no climax. She looked at him, then out the window where sunlight draped the wooden porch. Everything was small, just right, after so much noise had tried to fill the void. Out there, people still called her an icon. They still talked, wrote articles, analyzed the Sloane Mercer phenomenon. But here, in a place of hot tea and cinnamon scent, she was nothing but herself, a woman who'd walked through doubt, ridicule, ostracism, and adulation, only to keep the one thing unchanged through it all, a pride that needed no validation from others' gazes. "Do you think people will stop talking about us?" Atlas asked, his hand gently rubbing her back. "Probably not," she replied, winking. "But we can." They laughed. A light, clean laugh, unburdened. In that moment, nothing more needed saying. No epilogue, no recognition. Because a story, when truly finished, doesn't need applause. It only needs 2 people still choosing each other after everything. And that was enough. The story of Sloane Mercer and Atlas Westbrook reminds us that courage in silence can make the whole world bow its head. Thank you for joining us on Millionaire and Heart Stories. See you again on the next journey that touches the heart.